Listen closely. You don't need to block him, and you definitely don't need to beg. What you need is a shift in mindset. The most powerful move you can make right now is doing nothing, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Let me show you exactly what to do instead and why it works. Ready? Here we go. Silence isn't weakness. It's one of the most powerful tools you have when you're trying to rebuild your confidence, protect your energy, and change the dynamic in a relationship. We live in a world where constant communication is expected, where a slow reply can trigger anxiety or assumptions, and where silence often gets mistaken for being passive or cold. But here's the truth. When you're dealing with someone who's pulling away, playing games, or not showing up for you the way they should, the last thing you want to do is keep reaching out. Silence here isn't about manipulation, it's about self-respect. When you stop texting first, you're not just holding your fingers back from the keyboard, you're reclaiming your emotional space. You're saying, I'm not going to keep pouring into someone who doesn't meet me halfway. And that shift, even though it feels uncomfortable, is a power move. It's you taking control of your own narrative instead of letting someone else decide how you feel about yourself. The moment you choose silence over chasing is the moment you start breaking the cycle of emotional dependency, because that's what it is. Every time you reach out hoping for a response, hoping for validation, you're feeding a habit that reinforces the belief that your worth comes from someone else's attention, but it doesn't. In fact, silence forces clarity. It forces both you and the other person to sit with the truth. It gives them room to wonder, to reflect, to notice your absence instead of getting used to your constant presence. And it gives you room to take a breath, to ask yourself what you actually want, and to build emotional discipline. Most people don't realize how much energy they're spending texting someone who barely responds, constantly checking their phone, analyzing every message or lack of one. That's draining. It steals your focus, your peace, and the joy that comes from simply being present in your own life. Silence breaks that spiral. More importantly, silence shifts the dynamic. When you're always the one reaching out, the message is clear. You're willing to overextend, to overgive, and to wait. But when you stop, it creates a vacuum. People feel that, especially someone used to you always being there. Suddenly your energy is gone, your voice is absent, and that absence speaks louder than any message you could send. It tells them your self-worth isn't tied to their response, and that's powerful. Now, let's be honest, silence can feel like punishment at first, not just to them, but to you. You'll want to break it. You'll want to explain yourself, to fix things, to reach for connection again. But every time you sit in that discomfort and choose not to act, you're building self-trust. You're proving to yourself that you can hold the space between what you want and what you deserve. You're not being passive, you're being deliberate. You're releasing the need to control how someone else shows up and reclaiming control over how you show up for yourself. People mistake silence for weakness because it doesn't make noise, but real power doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes the strongest message is the one never sent. It says, I'm done being the version of me that has to beg to be seen. That's not cold, that's not dramatic, that's healing, that's alignment. And when you operate from that place, everything starts to change, especially how people treat you, because when you raise your standards and back them with silence, they either rise to meet you or they fall away. Either way, you win. Your energy is a mirror. How you carry yourself, how you speak, how you treat yourself, it all reflects outward and shows people how to treat you. You teach people what's acceptable based on what you allow, tolerate, and model. If you're constantly overextending, chasing, and bending yourself to be chosen, you're signaling that you don't believe you're enough on your own. And people respond to that, not necessarily to hurt you, but because your energy tells them they don't need to step up. When you operate from self-doubt or desperation, it creates an imbalance. And that imbalance is felt even when it's unspoken. What you project emotionally is exactly what people mirror back. If you move through your relationships anxious, waiting for the next text, decoding mixed signals, always afraid of losing someone, you give off an energy that screams uncertainty. That energy pushes people away, not because you're unlovable or unworthy, but because you're signaling that you don't believe you are. On the other hand, when you show up calm, confident, and grounded, even in silence, you send a different signal. That signal says, I'm good either way. I'm not chasing, I'm not begging, I'm not performing to be accepted. I accept myself. And people are drawn to confidence, not because it's loud or flashy, but because it feels safe. When your energy is rooted in self-respect, it changes how others respond to you. You become someone who doesn't need to over-explain or overshare just to keep someone engaged. You're not sending 3 follow-up texts hoping to get noticed. You're not waiting by your phone hoping they'll finally remember your worth. You already know your worth, and that quiet confidence commands attention. There's a real difference between wanting someone and needing them to validate your existence. When you shift your energy from needing outside approval to standing firm in your own value, it creates space. That's where people start to notice. They notice you're no longer reacting emotionally to every delay or disappointment. They notice you've stopped centering your life around someone who was never fully showing up, and that's when things shift. Often, it's exactly when you stop giving your energy away that people wake up to what they took for granted. Your energy is contagious. Show up anxious and needy, and it triggers avoidance in others. Show up grounded and peaceful, and it lets people feel that peace too. That's attractive. That's rare. Most people are caught in cycles of trying too hard or doing too much. When you don't play that game, when you stand still and firm in who you are, it's magnetic. You don't have to say a word. The energy speaks for itself. And this doesn't just apply to romantic relationships. It applies to every connection in your life. Friends, family, co-workers, they all respond to the energy you bring into the room. So ask yourself, what are you broadcasting? Confidence or insecurity? Peace or pressure? Clarity or chaos? Because whatever you put out is what keeps coming back. When you stop trying to convince someone to care and instead focus on caring for yourself, your energy rises and people notice that rise. Some will be drawn to it. Others will feel uncomfortable because they can no longer access the version of you that was always available. Either way, it's a reflection. Once you understand that your energy creates a mirror, you'll stop chasing people and start attracting alignment. You'll realize you never had to beg for love, you just had to embody it first. Stop playing emotional ping pong every time you react to someone's inconsistency. A late reply, a vague message, sudden distance, react to any of it, and you're stepping right back into a cycle that drains you. And honestly, it's exhausting. You text, they delay. You pull back, they reappear out of nowhere. You try to talk, they shut down. Round and round it goes. That's not connection. That's a loop, a cycle of false hope and temporary validation that keeps you stuck in emotional limbo. And worse, it trains your nervous system to link love with anxiety, unpredictability, and overthinking. That's not healthy. That's not love. That's emotional ping pong. And the only way to win is to put the paddle down and walk away from the game. Every time you respond out of emotion, because you're anxious, confused, or afraid of losing them, you reinforce the imbalance. You teach yourself that their breadcrumbs are enough. You convince yourself maybe this time will be different if you just say the right thing, text at the right moment, or keep the peace. But here's the truth. When someone genuinely values you, you won't have to work this hard for clarity. Love doesn't need decoding. When someone's serious about you, it shows up consistent, respectful, secure. If you're constantly second-guessing what you say or reading between every line, you're not in a healthy connection. You're in an emotional trap. What you have to understand is that your reaction hands them power, not just power over the situation, but power over your sense of worth. Every time you engage in the back and forth, you reinforce a belief that your peace depends on their behavior, but your peace should never be up for negotiation. If they take hours to reply and you respond within minutes to prove you're still interested, you're sending a message. My attention isn't earned, it's automatic. If they ghost you and come back like nothing happened, and you pick the conversation back up without boundaries, you're saying you can treat me inconsistently, and I'll still be here. Walking away from the game doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to stop entertaining behavior that makes you feel small, confused, or disposable. You don't need to get the last word. You don't need to over-explain why you're pulling back. You don't even need closure from someone who never gave you clarity. What you need is space. Space to breathe, space to reset, space to remember who you were before you started tying your emotions to someone else's actions. That space is where healing begins. And don't let guilt or fear convince you that silence is cruel. You're not being rude. You're being real. If someone's behavior consistently hurts or confuses you, choosing not to engage isn't disrespect. It's emotional maturity. It's you saying, I'm not playing anymore. I'm choosing peace over patterns. I'm choosing growth over games. You can care about someone and still choose to protect your mental health. You can love deeply and still refuse to accept emotional chaos as the norm. Your heart is valuable, and it deserves to be handled with care, not used as a ball in someone else's inconsistent game. When you feel the pull to jump back into the match, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, am I responding to be heard or reacting out of fear? The difference is everything, because one comes from strength and the other from survival. And you're not here to survive someone's inconsistency. You're here to thrive in love that feels safe, steady, and secure. Stop swinging. Stop reacting. Put the paddle down and let them play alone. You're done. You can't control whether he texts you back. You can't control whether he sees your worth, whether he shows up the way you hoped, or whether he ever realizes what he lost. But what you can control is you, your reactions, your mindset, your decisions. That's where your power lives. Not in trying to force a connection, not in obsessing over someone's next move, but in owning how you show up when things feel uncertain. Most people waste their energy chasing clarity from someone else, when the truth is clarity comes from within. And the more you try to control someone else's behavior, the more you lose control of your own peace. Trying to change someone or convince them to see you differently is an exhausting job that never pays off. And worse, it hands your entire emotional life to someone else. Every day becomes a waiting game. You check your phone more than you check in with yourself. You replay conversations, hunt for clues, analyze tone, reread texts. You get pulled into a loop where their actions or inaction decide whether your day is good or bad. That's not connection. That's emotional captivity. And it's entirely preventable once you choose to refocus. The shift happens the moment you stop asking, why isn't he texting, and start asking, why am I giving this so much of my energy? Because your attention is power. Wherever you place your focus, your mind follows. Keep waiting for a response, and you'll keep feeling stuck. But shift your focus back to you, to your peace, your routine, your progress, and you immediately take back control. You stop spiraling and start stabilizing. And from that place, everything changes. This isn't about playing games or trying to look strong. This is about being strong, choosing to pour your energy into things that actually grow you instead of wear you down. You don't need to overanalyze what someone else is thinking. What matters more is what you're thinking. Are you holding yourself to a higher standard? Are you showing up for yourself even when someone else falls short? Are you building a life that feels good with or without their validation? The truth is, when you stop trying to get someone to act a certain way and instead focus on how you act, you feel lighter, you breathe deeper, you stop waiting. And ironically, that's often the exact moment they start noticing. When your energy shifts, it's felt. You go from being someone who's emotionally available on demand to someone who's present for themselves first. That's powerful. That's magnetic, because people are drawn to those who aren't desperately trying to be chosen. They're drawn to people who have already chosen themselves. It's okay to want someone to reach out. It's human, but don't build your day or your self-worth around a notification. That message you're waiting for shouldn't determine how worthy you feel. You can want the connection, but still prioritize your own emotional discipline. That means you still go for your walk, you still hit the gym, you still write, work, heal, grow, even if they never reply. That's real strength. That's what creates momentum in your life. Control isn't about manipulating outcomes. It's about choosing your response. Every time you decide not to reach out, not to spiral, not to let your mood get hijacked, you're building a stronger version of yourself. And the stronger you get, the less you tolerate inconsistency. You start to realize love isn't something you chase, it's something you align with. And alignment starts with ownership. So own your time, own your energy, own your response, because at the end of the day, the one thing you can always control is how you show up for yourself. The version of you that chases, overthinks, and compromises just to be chosen isn't the real you. It's the survival version. It's the part of you that's afraid to be alone, afraid to be forgotten, afraid to face rejection. But the real you is grounded, clear, whole. She doesn't beg, doesn't chase, and definitely doesn't shrink herself to fit someone else's comfort zone. The real you knows her worth, doesn't hinge on who stays, who texts back, or who sees her value. And the more you release the need for someone else's validation, the closer you get to her. But here's the thing. Reconnecting with that version of you takes discipline. It takes walking away from conversations that go in circles. It takes choosing silence when your ego wants to send a long paragraph. It takes resisting the urge to settle just to avoid the discomfort of sitting in limbo. That's where your strength gets built. In the moments you choose peace over proving your worth, you stop trying to be enough for someone who can't see you and start becoming everything for yourself. You were not built to live in confusion. You were not built to constantly question where you stand in someone's life. That feeling of unease, of second-guessing yourself, of replaying every interaction, that's not love. That's emotional chaos. And the real you doesn't operate in chaos. She doesn't thrive there. She shuts it down and chooses clarity. That means you have to unlearn the habit of emotional chasing. You have to stop thinking love is something you earn by being more agreeable, more available, more accommodating. It's not. Real love sees you without you having to perform, and the real you doesn't perform. She shows up as she is and lets what's meant for her match that energy. There's a part of you that already knows what you deserve. But when you're used to crumbs, even silence feels like a threat. That's why people often go back to what hurts them. It's familiar, it's predictable, but predictable isn't the same as safe. You deserve to feel secure, not suspicious. You deserve peace, not patterns. And when you finally get tired of the back and forth of the emotional roller coaster, you'll realize that choosing yourself isn't lonely, it's freeing. It's not about shutting people out. It's about no longer letting in what drains you. The real you doesn't tolerate hot and cold behavior. She doesn't check her phone every 5 minutes hoping for a sign. She's too busy building, too busy healing, too busy becoming. And yes, that version of you might unsettle some people because she's not easy to manipulate. She has boundaries. She's not driven by desperation. She's guided by self-respect. And self-respect has a frequency. It repels what isn't aligned and draws in what is. But you only reach that frequency when you stop abandoning yourself in relationships that aren't reciprocal. You don't need to beg someone to see you. You need to see you. You need to remember who you were before heartbreak made you question your value, before mixed signals confused your intuition, before you started thinking you had to fight for love. The real you doesn't fight to be seen. She stands tall and lets the right ones recognize her. And the more you step into that identity, the more your energy shifts. People feel that. They notice the change even if they never say it. They realize they can't play the same games with you anymore because you're no longer in that arena. You've upgraded. You've outgrown the version of you that was okay being almost loved. And now you're stepping into wholeness. Waiting can be one of the hardest things to do, especially when your heart is invested and your mind is restless. But learning how to wait with intention, without panic or desperation, is a game changer. It's not about passively sitting on the sidelines hoping something happens. It's about actively choosing patience as a form of self-respect and strength. Waiting becomes an act of power once you understand that timing is everything, and rushing only leads to confusion and disappointment. Instead of begging for attention or trying to force a connection, you learn to trust the process and trust yourself enough to hold your ground. Many people mistake waiting for weakness, but waiting well takes more courage than chasing desperately. It means you're willing to stand firm in your values, your worth, and your boundaries, even when the outcome is uncertain. Waiting tests your faith in yourself, in your growth, and in the fact that what's truly meant for you will arrive at the right time. It's about believing that your worth isn't defined by immediate validation or someone's quick response, but by the steady value you place on yourself, regardless of outside circumstances. When you wait intentionally, you're not ignoring your feelings or pretending you're fine when you're not. You're acknowledging your emotions, but not letting them dictate your decisions. You recognize the difference between being patient and being passive. Patience means holding space for what could be, without sacrificing what already is, your peace, your dignity, your progress. It means you're not stuck in a cycle of anxiety, constantly refreshing your phone or overanalyzing every silence. Instead, you're focused on your life, your goals, and your healing. You use the waiting time to invest in yourself rather than fixating on what's out of your control. Waiting also builds resilience. It teaches you how to sit with uncertainty and trust that life doesn't always unfold on your schedule. You become less reactive and more reflective. Instead of reacting to every text or lack of one, you learn to respond with intention, calm, and clarity. This mindset shift is what separates people who get stuck in unhealthy loops from those who break free and move forward with confidence. There's a quiet power in silence and space. When you stop filling the gaps with messages, explanations, or demands, you let things breathe. You create room for clarity for both yourself and the other person. Sometimes absence really does make the heart grow fonder because it invites reflection and appreciation. Constant presence can dull things, but more importantly, waiting with intention means you're not settling for anything less than respect and consistency. You aren't lowering your standards just because you're eager for connection. This kind of waiting requires self-discipline, one of the most underrated parts of emotional maturity. It's easy to want something and hard to wait for it, but learning to wait without losing yourself in the process is where real growth happens. It shows that you value yourself enough not to settle for crumbs or confusion. It teaches you that your peace matters more than a quick fix or temporary reassurance. Along the way, you become more in tune with your intuition and more confident in your boundaries. You stop chasing people who don't prioritize you and start making room for those who do. You start to see that waiting isn't about clinging to the past or holding on to blind hope. It's about trusting that the right things come to those who respect their own timing. And when you finally do move forward, whether that's reconnecting, moving on, or finding something new, you do it with clarity and strength. You're not running after someone out of desperation. You're choosing connection from a place of wholeness. That's when love, or any meaningful relationship, actually has a chance to thrive because it's built on respect, patience, and intention, not fear or urgency. Waiting isn't easy, but it's a powerful act of self-love. It changes how you relate to yourself and others. It shifts your energy from neediness to empowerment and from chaos to calm, and that shift changes everything. As we close this out, remember your power lies not in chasing or pleading, but in standing firm in your worth and peace. When you stop reacting out of fear and start responding with intention, you reclaim control over your life and your emotions. Trust that by honoring yourself through your energy, your boundaries, and your patience, you invite the right people and the right circumstances into your life. You don't have to beg for attention or prove your value through someone else's actions. Instead, walk confidently in your strength, knowing real connection happens when you're whole and unapologetically you. Keep believing in your worth. Hold on to your peace.